Good morning, everyone. Good morning, welcome. We're doing this. How many people were here last night? Few, had a great time, right? It was an amazing event with Chinelo Akparanta and Akweke Amezi, and that event, moderated by Yvette Christianse, will be available on our website in due course. So if you missed it, you can still see it. My name is Elizabeth Castelli. I'm the interim director of the Barnard Center for Research on Women, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our conference, the 44th Annual Scholar and Feminist Conference devoted to the theme, The Politics and Ethics of the Archive. Before I say anything else, I want to introduce our Asl Interpreters, Brandon and Candace, and would invite anyone who has a particular need for their interpretation to identify themselves to them so that they can work with you through the course of the conference. For those who do not require interpretation but are studying ASL, I would very happy to announce that Barnard has recently approved ASL as a second language, so students can meet their language requirements by studying ASL. So there may be students in the audience who are learning a bit. So, and we just believe in this as a kind of universal access service to offer. So, plus it's beautiful to watch. So thank you. This conference is bringing to life the works and work and ideas and collaboration of a lot of people. And I just want to take a minute to thank everyone who participated in the planning of this event. It was really a community project. Our planning committee included, in addition to myself, BCRW staff members Pam Phillips, Hope Dector, Avi Cummings, Che Gossett, Tammy Navarro, as well as our English department colleague Meredith Benjamin, and two colleagues from the library, archivists Shannon O'Neill and Martha Tenney. The inspiration for the conference came from work that Che and Shannon and Martha have been doing with an audio archive that we have of earlier Scholar and Feminist conferences where the events were not videotaped or live streamed. We didn't have that back then, but we did have tape recorders where you push two buttons, one that went record and the other went play, and then we had these little tapes. Anyway, so we're taking all of that great media and digitizing it, but also having a bigger conversation about how do we use that material now? Do we simply disseminate it as is? Do we curate it in some way? Do we take some time to think about the politics of who was in the room, who wasn't in the room, who was speaking, who wasn't speaking, and all those kinds of things. And so it was that sort of original set of questions that we were thinking about that became the inspiration, the little kernel that blossomed into this wonderful conference. So I want to thank them for that work. I'm big into thanking people for their work because everybody works really hard around here. And I want to offer really special thanks and shout out to BCRW Administrator Pam Phillips, BCRW Program and Communications Manager Avi Cummings, and BCRW's newest staff member, post-baccalaureate fellow Eve Kausch, who arrived to start her job a week ago yesterday. And we were like, oh, we're just having this big conference that 700 people said they're coming to. So, you know, welcome. So she's been doing great. And all three of these people have done just an astonishing amount of work to bring the conference together. So when you see them, please thank them because they've done great. We also have a whole group of student research assistants who are working this conference: Tirza Anderson, Asha Futterman, Emily He, Sophie Kreitzberg, and Emily Reed, as well as a whole group of student volunteers: Jenna O, Emma Mohammed, Deja Bryan, Maya Garfinkel, Aiden Shad, Kayla Legrand, and Julia Cuccaro. And so thanks to all those students for spending the day with us. This conference wouldn't take place if we didn't have collaboration from a lot of parts of the college and the university and beyond. And first I want to acknowledge the work of a lot of the people who work at Barnard whose work is often invisible to us but really makes things happen. The folks in events management, the people in the communications department, public safety, media services and AV, catering for our lovely meals all through the day, and especially the facilities staff who really just do so much to make the the space work for us. And in the celebration of the facility staff, could I ask people, when you're done eating, could you not just leave your stuff on the floor, but pick it up, and there are trash receptacles and recycling things around. It'd just be very helpful. So, because we're feeding you constantly through this conference, and unfortunately, we're not being very kind to the planet in the process, but just think about that and pick up after yourselves, said my mother. Okay. We've had a lot of co-sponsorships for this conference, and I want very quickly to mention all of the parts of Barnard and Columbia and beyond that have helped us make this happen. The Digital Humanities Center here at Barnard, which is in the new building in the Milstein Center. One of our workshops is going to be happening in the DHC today, so those of you who pick that workshop will get to see that wonderful space. The Barnard Library and Archives, the Office of Student Life, the Office of the Provost, and a whole range of academic departments and programs, Africana Studies, American Studies, the English department, first year writing, psychology department, the religion department, urban studies program, and the women, gender, sexuality studies department, as well as the consortium for critical interdisciplinary studies. All of that's a mouthful. Thank you, Barnard colleagues around the disciplines. Our colleagues at Columbia have also been very generous with their support. The Institute for Religion, Culture, and Public Life, the Institute for Research on African American Studies, the Institute for Research on Women, Gender, Sexuality, the MFA Writing Program, the Religion Department, the Center for the Study of Social Difference. NYU Center for the Study of Gender and Sexuality is also a generous co-sponsor, as is Apogee Journal, which is a great partner for us for the various writing programs that we sponsor. And I just want to mention that the executive editor of that journal is Alex Watson, who is a colleague of ours here at Barnard and who was just awarded a big prize from PEN America for her work as an editor. So we have rock stars just everywhere in our midst. It's very nice. I also want to mention that outside where the exhibits are, and I know a lot of you got to check them out last night or this morning, continue to do that because they're amazing. But Word Up Community Bookshop is there selling books written by people who are involved in the conference. Word Up is very close to my heart. It's an all-volunteer-run community bookshop and art space in Washington Heights. I am a proud volunteer at Word Up. I'm missing my shift today to be here, so I felt bad about that, but here I am. And so Vanessa is out there selling books, and you should buy them because you support great community organizing up in the Heights, and we appreciate that. Okay, I think I have done all of those expressions of gratitude. I want to just say a few words about the questions that animated our planning for this conference. As I've mentioned already, the planning began inspired by the work of Shannon O'Neill, Martha Tenney, and Che Gossett, who are working on the digitized audio recordings of old Scholar and Feminist conferences and adding them to our archive. In the process, they had begun to ask questions about issues of representation, whose voices are preserved on those audio tapes, who was in the room but silent, who wasn't there, how do we address and activate those silences and absences in order not simply to represent the past, but also to avoid reinscribing those kinds of historical exclusions through our contemporary curation of the past? What are our ethical obligations to people whose voices are preserved in those recordings and to those whose voices are not? These sorts of questions led to a bunch of other questions. How do we move beyond the notion of the archive as an indifferent repository of textual material, digital materials, and move towards thinking about the archive as a space of engagement? How can archival material be put to use to draw attention to muted histories and otherwise invisible networks of affiliation and connection? What difference do recent digital tools and capabilities make in the archiving and accessing of the past? Who owns the past? What sorts of relationships of obligation and responsibility exist between established institutions like college library archives, and individuals and communities whose archives and histories might best be preserved in such established institutions, but whose interests may not perfectly align with them? How should we think about and theorize the precarity of some archives, their necessary incompleteness, the sometimes accidental nature of their preservation, their vulnerability to loss, deterioration, and destruction? How do we begin to build a scaffolding of responsibility to the communities represented in archives into the process of acquisition, cataloging, curation, and exhibition? Related to the question of ownership, how do we represent the provenance of materials? How do we assure that representation doesn't veer towards appropriation? How can those of us thinking about archives attend to the problem of absent archives, disappearing archives, archives under threat? How should we think about the relationship of archival collection, especially in a digital mode, when we are all completely hyper-conscious of the ease with which data can turn into the raw material for surveillance? What's the relationship of archival preservation to bigger issues like contestations over sovereignty, reparations for past practices, climate change? What kinds of partnerships, alliances, and collaborations might be possible to put the resources of established institutions to work in support of local community and activist projects for preserving histories? So these are just some of the questions that we might think about and might come into play over the course of today's panels, exhibits, workshops, and keynote address. I want to say that we were very intentional about trying to organize this conference with a range of different formats so that we wouldn't have only talking heads up here and an audience listening, but have various occasions for people to interact with one another in various ways around the exhibits, in the workshops that will happen over the lunch hour and a half, and have also some built-in time for people just to meet and talk with one another. So we're hoping that the shifting up of formats will increase people's access to one another and to teaching and learning together. So I'm really grateful to everyone who's here to participate in this effort at teaching and learning, and I welcome you to the day's program. I'd like to invite you in this moment to just meet the people around you while the panel that is going to start the day comes to the stage. So, you know, it's a little hokey, but, you know, somebody you don't know, say hello, introduce yourself, and make a new friend, okay? And I'll welcome the panel. All right.